Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about the shadow. Seems to be kind of a topic of conversation. There are these trends in discussions, for example, philosophy discussions. A couple of years ago, it was Stoicism, and it seems that once in a while my thoughts coincide with one of these kind of trends, but I make every effort not to start talking about topics that are trending. And it sounds kind of silly, but I was really into Stoicism about, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, understanding more about it, what it really means. And then I started seeing these, I'm not going to say ridiculous, but I guess I already did, motivational speakers on YouTube, these guys who make these very highly edited, high quality videos, with a whole crew of people where it's just them talking as if they're, these Tony Robbins of the world. And no offense, I mean, Tony Robbins isn't a bad guy. I'm just using him as an example that kind of, you can do it, you can do it, this is how you do it. Unfortunately, a lot of them don't share the tools to actually do it. Like many motivational speakers, they have a process, or a path. Some of these guys just make these kind of hack job like courses, but then they charge thousands of dollars for you to learn how to, be stoic. Let's just say I've, the charlatans are plenty, and the amount of self help and quote spirituality and these tools and courses to get you there. Even though I don't believe they really lead anywhere necessarily, I think that some of them can be very beneficial, especially when it comes to books and studies. Just be careful. A fool and his money will soon part. In other words, most of the important teachings should be free, okay? And they always have been, if we're willing to listen. So if somebody's trying to sell you something that's obvious ancient knowledge for some exorbitant price, you're probably being ripped off. Now, that's not what this video is about, but it came to mind, and naturally I talk about whatever's on my mind. As I'm wearing this green, you can see it's St. Patrick's Day today. Sorry, I'm going to call it Paddy's Day. And if you call it St. Paddy's Day, make sure that you're using D's and not T's. Patty is a female name. Paddy is different, and that is the origin, has a different origin. But anyway, that said, I don't really give a shit about St. Patrick or his day. I have Irish and Scottish roots. My last name is Orr, but Americans just look at it as some excuse to get drunk at 9 in the morning, I guess. So that's neither here nor there, but it's part of our culture and custom, I guess, in America to celebrate other holidays and totally misunderstand them. So back to the point of the video, which is the shadow work. I had to work my way up to it. This is another concept that I think is very misunderstood, somewhat like Stoicism. And when I say misunderstood, I'm not telling you I have the proper definition of anything. I'm just another guy who does my own studies on my own time. I study so much and so many different things, and I'm so fascinated with so many aspects of life, whether it's, research into space or, geology or plants or chemistry. I'm spread thin over many different disciplines and interests, and because of this, I'm the old jack of all trades, master of none. Oftentimes better than master of one, which is the rest of that. And I prefer to know a little bit about everything, so I'm cautious not to pretend like I understand everything fully. And that's kind of my disclaimer as to saying, if a person were to ask, how do you know what the fuck the shadow is? Well, even some of the wisest philosophers that I've personally deemed to be, great speakers, there's a few channels on YouTube that I follow that are occult type stuff, where they get into esoteric philosophy, and many I've been following for quite a while, and some of them are newer, some of them faded away. But ultimately, I've come to my own conclusions on many of these topics. So when I hear somebody who sounds like they know what they're talking about, but it's something that I know to be either untrue or misunderstood by them, it's hard for me not to speak out and say something. Like I heard a post the other day. Somebody left a YouTube post, and it's an older guy who has a YouTube channel, and he was saying, in a nutshell, crystals, books, yoga, tarot cards. He's like, basically, all this is garbage. It's not the real spiritual work. You've got to do the real work. And then there was another post today, something like, to the effect of something very similar, but about doing work on the darkness of the self, which I considered, I guess, to be the same as the Jungian shadow self. And what is the shadow self? I'm going to get into that, but in it, what I was saying to the person, who left the post was, yes, we have to do the real work from within. The real work is embracing these aspects of yourself and understanding truth through your own experiences. But nobody would even know to look for it if we hadn't read books. Nobody would even know that there was an esoteric philosophy if they hadn't read books and tablets and translations and had these philosophies shown to them, whether it's through symbolism or studies or, yes, even crystals or tarot cards. Because I was trying to explain this to my wife and the son the other night, how what I think about kind of spiritual tools, whether it be a divining rod, whether it be scrying, which is looking into clear water as a reflection, or whether it be using a crystal ball, whether it's using tarot cards, rolling bones, throwing sticks, various different psychic practices that people have, or I can't even think of all the different types of practices that people use to try to either divine the future, the past, the present, or to reach forces or dimensions that maybe are beyond our reach in daily life. Is there any reality to that? It'd be hard. You'd be hard pressed to find one person who really thinks that all of it's bullshit, right? That nobody's ever had a true religious breakthrough or experience, or there's never been a person who could really, let's say, remote viewing, the amount of money the government spent on things like remote viewing and psychics to try to understand it better. What I believe is it's a tool we can't wield, and that some people have the ability to use, but don't really understand it well enough because not enough of us can really embrace that part of our minds. Kind of the way that an anthill knows when a soldier dies to make a new soldier, right? I mean, there's a common hive mind that humans probably have deep within. But on another topic, all of this is part of our darkness, and to get to the point on the shadow, when we talk about the shadow self, the way I defined it was, and I think the best definition is to look at that part of yourself. First off, sit down and think about the part of yourself which you think to be the most useful, the most honest. What are your values? What do you think is important in life? And what is your demeanor and your behavior like? And then find the opposite to all of that and embrace it. So this can work many ways. This is to show that it's not necessarily a negative. So, or it wouldn't be seen as a negative to everyone. The shadow, it's not just darkness. Your shadow follows you everywhere, but it's the direct opposite of who you are. It's the part of yourself that you don't allow to show. So in other words, if you're a really nice person and you're always kind to people, your shadow might be that part of yourself that stands up for yourself, puts up boundaries, the one who is outspoken and feels like, that feeling like you walk away from a situation like, I should have said something, that's your shadow. That's the part of yourself that isn't who you are, but something you need to embrace that you're being told. Likewise, if you're the kind of person who is a complete asshole all the time to everyone, treats everyone like shit and acts entitled, your shadow is the nice guy. You see what I mean? Because it's just as painful for the nice person to be harsh as it is for the harsh person to be nice. There are different personalities, different ideas about what it means to be human. So your shadow is going to be that side of yourself which you have a hard time showing because you're so immersed in one side. And the point of this is really to bring your shadow to union, to where there is no shadow any longer. You might call it high noon. And on that note, the interesting thing about that, I thought earlier, that nobody seems to mention when they talk about the shadow self, is that if you walk around life ignorant and you don't pay attention, you're basically living under the clouds, in a cloud, right? And with the cloud, what do you get? No sunshine. And when you have no sunshine, you have no shadow. You see, the shadow is there lying in waiting, but maybe it's just too faint for you to see. When you seek truth and wisdom, which you could use the sun as a symbol for that, then you start to see your shadow. And where your shadow is depends on where the sun is. In other words, where you are on your journey. I don't want to get too symbolic or metaphor ridden with this, but these are the things that I really want to be able to express in words, but have a hard time finding the language for. Now, I believe that there's a deeper purpose for mankind. There's a deeper purpose for especially a certain group of usually men. I don't want to say that women aren't, part of this too, because I know that there are a lot of women philosophers and seekers out there, and I respect that. But I've also found that it's not generally something that interests most women, whereas a large amount of men I've met tend to be very fascinated with the occult, the mystical, religion, trying to understand where we come from, embracing some of these cultural traditions and trying to, find out what this is all about, in which we may take many journeys and try many different paths. Some people may fall into a particular religion. Some people might fall into some sort of a pagan practice. Maybe they meet a group of people who worship the earth. Other people, they don't need any type of worship or religion at all. They just see the divine through a different lens. This would be maybe kind of Freudianism, if you will. I wasn't very familiar with Sigmund Freud, or I said, did I say Freudianism? Freudism. I meant Jungian philosophy, Jungianism. I always tend to, because those two were actually friends for a while, but Carl Jung parted ways with him because they had disagreements. Let's just say Freud was more rigid in his approach, and tell me about your mother. It was always about mother. He obviously had mommy issues, but Jung was of a different breed. He got into psychology because of his experiences when he was young. These seances that people in his family had done. They had seen ghosts and spirits and had these weird encounters. He would have these, he'd have these daydreams. And so his perspective and the way that he saw things was different. But he came to the same conclusion that, there's a higher power, a higher energy out there, and a path to understanding these truths. But that you don't necessarily have to label it, I think a lot of the hang-up comes when people want to label every experience they have, that it's crucial to them, that they have, X, Y, and Z figured out, and they know exactly what this passage means in their book, whatever Bible it might be. Or if they're, in more of a, what I would like to say on that note, I'm not dismissing the Bible outright or any religious text. In fact, I'd say that a lot of the, quote, spiritual teachings come from things much younger, which are even less understood. I mentioned this to somebody I knew who was into Reiki healing, and I felt bad saying it, but I was like, well, this was invented 100 years ago by, I think, a Japanese guy who went to a mountaintop and he was trying to find some truth about how to heal. I don't remember the details, but he came back down and said, this is how you do it. But then there wasn't even really a standard of teaching. Like Reiki was taught different by different people. Here's my thought. It's not about the Reiki. It doesn't matter which type of healing you do. It's about your belief in it. So if your intention, I believe our intentions heal. I believe that there's a lot to be said about that, including ourselves, and also allow us to seek that deeper self. If you really want to understand, you have to ask. And I think that I overlook talking about the shadow often because I've really embraced mine. It's one of those things where when somebody says you're this way or that way, or say you're selfish, I'll say, well, sometimes. Maybe in the way I need to be. I have some faith in myself that I make the right decisions. I know I can do better in some areas, and I continue to work towards that, but I'm aware of it, you see. I haven't put my faults on others. And put it this way, if you're blaming other people for your shortcomings in life, whether it be old bosses or your parents or whatever it might be, then you haven't embraced any part of your shadow to understand that it's you who causes all of your own problems. You know, obviously there are exceptions. Shit happens, as they say. But where we are in life is really a lot dependent on us. And even if others are to blame, it does nothing to place blame. It doesn't even make us feel better. It just complicates shit. So we move on, move forward. Embracing a lot of these things, you know, letting go of the past, we can overcome a lot of those shadows and feel pretty confident, you know, about who we are overall. Because some days when I'm feeling really down on myself, which happens often, like in the morning, I'll feel like, God, I don't want to do this. What am I doing? I don't want to go to this job, or, you know, I need to be more responsible this way or that way, or the waking up at 3 a.m. worry shit like everybody has sometimes. You know, I just say this is part of life. Could be worse. Take care of business. Get it done, you know. We're all human. We're doing the best we can. Sitting out in our cold garages making videos before our fingers freeze off. God, it's cold for a March day out here. For a St. Patty's Day. I guess it's always cold in March. But yeah, I'm wearing my greens, so you can't pinch me, fool. I was just thinking about the episode of South Park with Butters, and where he pinches a girl and then he goes to the police station and gets arrested for sexual harassment and turns into this whole thing. Yeah, South Park's great. Praise South Park. I watched their 25th anniversary special. I think it's a few years old now, but I hadn't seen it yet. And it had Primus and Ween on stage, and then Rush came out, and they played a bunch of live songs from the show. If you're not a South Park fan, you probably don't give a shit, but bringing that up because they've really embraced the shadow of society, okay? The shadow of especially American culture, the part that we don't want to talk about. And you see how popular it is with a lot of people. Some can't handle it, some can. Now, that yeah, a lot of it's just vulgar and horrible. But even the vulgar ones, at least in the later years, have a strong point. They still hold strong as to social issues, which we need a little comedic gold to deal with all the shit that we have to deal with every day. So, with that said, that's my rant for the day and my ramble about the shadow self. I guess I went off more about other things than that, but that's how it goes sometimes on my channel. So it is what it is. Yeah. What does embracing my shadow mean? Well, that's for me to decide, and probably shouldn't even go there here. But you know what yours are. Figure them out. Peace and love. I'll see you next time. Special thank you to all my patrons on Patreon. You support the channel. I love you to death. Also, if you're not familiar, I have a podcast called 15 Minute Free Thinking. Beyond that, not much more to say. See you next time. Peace.